the day of my father-in-law's funeral, carried a weight that went far beyond grief. The atmosphere was thick with murmurs of speculation, everyone silently calculating what would happen to the vast fortune he left behind. He had been a self-made titan, building an empire worth nearly $400 million. My wife stood by the casket, her face arranged in an expression of sorrow. But after years of marriage, I could tell the difference between genuine mourning and rehearsed emotion. The tears glistening on her cheeks weren't for him. They were for the audience watching. Behind that veil of grief, her eyes glittered with expectation. A week later, the will was read. The numbers were staggering. She was declared the recipient of $379 million. No restrictions, no gradual distribution. Everything was hers immediately. That night, she dropped her mask completely. "You're worthless to me now," she said flatly, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier's light. "I'm filing for divorce." I leaned back in my chair, almost amused. My only reply was calm. "Don't come to regret this later." She smirked, convinced she'd won already. The divorce paperwork moved swiftly, her excitement blinding her to the fine print. She thought she was stepping into a new life of endless indulgence, free from what she believed was my burden. What she didn't realize was that her father's will held a condition she had overlooked. Chapter 2, The Will's Hidden Trap. The day of the divorce hearing was supposed to be her crowning moment. She swept into the lawyer's office wrapped in designer fabric, her wrists and neck weighed down with new jewelry. With a flourish, she signed the final documents, as if 3 decades of marriage were nothing more than a formality. She leaned back with a self-satisfied smile. Finally free and finally rich. Exactly what I deserve. But her satisfaction lasted only seconds. The family lawyer, a man who had been loyal to her father for years, opened a thick leather-bound binder and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Collins, forgive me, but did you actually read the will carefully?" The confident smile froze on her face. "What do you mean?" "It said everything came to me." The lawyer chuckled softly and shook his head. "No, ma'am. You never received anything independently. You and your husband were designated as joint heirs. The estate is secured in a trust bound to the marriage. By ending that marriage, you've legally forfeited your share." The blood drained from her cheeks. "That's impossible." Without a word, he turned the binder toward her. A section was neatly marked in red ink. "Your father wanted his fortune to remain within the family unit. This clause explicitly states that if the marriage dissolves, sole control of the trust reverts to the son-in-law." Her hands trembled against the table. The diamonds she had so proudly displayed now looked cheap, like costumes from a stage play. The lawyer leaned back, almost entertained. "So, you see, Mr. Collins isn't walking away with nothing." "You are." Chapter 3, Her Desperate Counterattack. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. She had gone on the offensive, painting herself as a victim online. After 30 years of sacrifice, my husband left me destitute. He twisted my father's will. He betrayed me. Her carefully curated posts earned hundreds of sympathetic replies. Old friends and distant relatives rallied behind her, some even calling me a manipulator and a thief. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Within days, she launched a legal challenge. She hired an elite attorney who promised her that the clause could be overturned or reinterpreted. But the will had been drafted personally by her father's longtime lawyer. It was ironclad. In court, her appeal was dismissed in under 15 minutes. Next came emotional manipulation. She flooded our children with late-night texts, tearful phone calls, and pleas to talk to your father and make me share. But my kids already knew the truth, that she discarded me the moment she thought she no longer needed me. My daughter sent her a single message in reply. "You had Dad. You had us. You chose greed instead. Don't contact us again." With legal and family options shut, she tried the last weapon she had, her reputation. She arranged a dinner with some of her father's old business partners, spinning a story about her cruel husband who had schemed her out of her rightful inheritance. What she didn't realize was that the lawyer had already briefed them all. They knew every detail of the will. By the end of dinner, she was politely asked to leave. The very people who once showered her with praise now refused to answer her calls. Her wealth had evaporated overnight. Her reputation was in ruins. And for the first time, she realized the power was no longer hers. Chapter 4. Turning the fortune into a weapon. I didn't waste time celebrating. My father-in-law had trusted me with the legacy he built, and I intended to carry it forward. Still, there was a certain poetry in ensuring every dollar of that $379 million reminded her of what she had thrown away. Financial justice. The first step was creating a charitable foundation in his name. Its mission was clear: to support hardworking families, small businesses, and veterans. Everything she had never valued. Each press release carried headlines like, Collins Foundation donates $10 million to local schools. Son-in-law leads initiative. Her name was never mentioned. Her frantic calls demanding recognition were ignored. The trust was mine alone, and legally, she had no claim to it. Chapter 4. Social and emotional ruin. She tried desperately to cling to the world she once ruled. The country club afternoons, glittering charity balls, long lunches at exclusive restaurants. But those doors shut fast. The donors and acquaintances who once fought for her attention now drifted away, redirecting their loyalty elsewhere. Invitations that had once arrived in bundles simply stopped coming. And without her father's wealth, she couldn't even fake her old lifestyle. The lavish cars, the penthouse, the designer image, all of it had been propped up by his fortune. Without it, those symbols of success quickly became crushing liabilities. The emotional blow, the harshest cut, wasn't financial or social. It was personal. The children who had once looked up to her no longer viewed her the same way. My son told her plainly, Dad built everything he has through hard work. The second you thought you didn't need him, you threw him away. Don't contact us again. Hearing that from the child she always assumed would take her side left her hollow. From my perspective, I didn't need to argue, raise my voice, or seek revenge. Her destruction was baked into her own greed. And every time she saw my picture in the papers, standing proudly beside the projects funded with the inheritance she believed was hers, the wound only deepened. Chapter 5. The Public Reckoning. The largest gala of the year was held in the same ballroom where my father-in-law had celebrated countless milestones. This time, the Collins Foundation was the headline sponsor, and I, not my ex-wife, sat at the head table. The chandeliers sparkled, cameras flashed, and the city's most powerful figures filled the room. Midway through the evening, I noticed her slipping in. She wore last year's gown, and alone, and tried to act as though she belonged. She wasn't even on the guest list, but hoped she could bluff her way past the staff. Her eyes froze on the stage. My name, not hers, was everywhere on banners, brochures, and the giant screens behind me. The speech. When I stepped up to the podium, I began with gratitude. This foundation exists because of the vision of my late father-in-law. His legacy was never about money. It was about duty to family, to community, to those who sacrifice for others. I paused, letting the silence stretch across the room. Then I leaned into the microphone. That is why it was written so carefully, not for greed or vanity, but to protect what mattered most. From the corner of my eye, I saw her stiffen. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Everyone understood the implication. The twist. At the end of the night, we unveiled the Foundation's first major initiative, a multi-million-dollar scholarship program for single-parent abandoned or betrayed, giving them a chance to rebuild their lives. The applause shook the room. Flashes from cameras lit up the stage, and she went pale in the shadows. Every dollar she thought she had stolen was now being invested into people she had once looked down on. The walkout. As the event wound down, I walked right past her. She tried to speak, her lips trembling, but I didn't stop. The crowd parted around me. Reporters shouted my name. Colleagues shook my hand. Behind me, she stood invisible, alone and irrelevant. The words she once threw at me came back in my mind, but this time with truth. You're useless to me now. Only now. It was her burden to carry. Epilogue. 1 year later. 12 months passed, and our worlds couldn't have been more different. Her life. The gossip magazines that once flaunted her photos at charity events now published headlines about her downfall. heiress squanders inheritance, loses everything in divorce. The so-called friends who used to orbit around her vanished long ago. One by one, she sold her jewels, her cars, and eventually the penthouse itself. By year's end, she was living in a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city, scraping by with part-time work just to pay the bills. When she tried to claw her way back into her old social circles, she was met with indifference. To them, she no longer existed. My life. Meanwhile, the foundation flourished. Programs for veterans, scholarships for struggling parents, grants for small businesses, each carried the Collins name, alongside my face. My children, who once felt torn, now stood beside me proudly at events, introducing me as her father, not her former husband. Major newspapers ran glowing profiles. The son-in-law who preserved the empire. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. My influence growing stronger while she disappeared into obscurity. The final encounter. It happened by chance, on a rainy afternoon, in a quiet cafe. I spotted her first. She looked smaller, older, her once perfectly styled hair tied back, a worn coat covering her frame. For a moment, her eyes lit up, hope, desperation, maybe even the urge to beg. But I simply nodded politely and walked past. I didn't slow down because there was nothing left to say. She had once told me, "You're useless to me now." But in the end, it was she who had become useless to everyone. And that truth was the most fitting revenge of all.